I want to take this one first because I saw it come in before the show even started. We have Anna in Eastern Europe, who's a theist. And how are you? Is it Anna or Anna?
Anna, hello.
Anna,
Awesome.
welcome.
Can you hear me all right?
We hear you just fine. How are you and how can we help?
I'm stuck in my deconstruction, but it's my position is a bit different. I wasn't really raised theist. Um, in my upbringing, religion really didn't feature much. Not that I was raised directly atheist, but religion was something that other people did or had. But I was curious about the topic. I explored a lot, from the quote-unquote real religions like Christianity, Islam, and so on, to the more alternative, New Age, pagan, and so on religions. But now I'm stuck with a belief I can shake. And the funny part is that I didn't really realize that I was theist until I started watching your shows. And Forrest, I remember one of your shows. I won't be able to really quote you, but you said that you don't believe in God, but if there was one, it is an invisible God, and you were willing to fight against it. And that's when it hit me. I wouldn't be able to say that without being afraid. And it made me realize that on some low level in the back of my mind, I still believe in a deity that can make my life miserable if I'm not a good girl. Does this make any sense to you?
Yes, absolutely yes.
So now I'm wondering how to shake that voice in the back of my mind.
Sure.
I'm afraid to stop believing. I'm afraid to stop obeying these rules, which I can't even really point out.
Well, the question is, which God are you most afraid of? For example, are you more afraid of the God of Christianity or the God of Islam?
It's a bit of a mess because I picked up a bit from all directions. I believe in an anthropomorphic entity, which is not quite supernatural, but possesses the knowledge, which makes it indistinguishable from a supernatural being.
Sure. But if you so
it has the temperament of the Old Testament God, but I never believed neither in heaven or in hell. I just believe that we're stuck in this plane, and this Old Testament bully can make our life miserable if we don't obey.
Except we have no evidence that that being exists. We have no evidence that it's actually doing that. And so the question is, figure out which God you're afraid of, and then how do you know what you are supposed to do to avoid the wrath of that God?
I have absolutely no reason to believe in a God like this. I'm aware of it, but on the emotional level, the fear is still there, and that is no problem.
What I'm asking is, if you assume that the God that you're afraid of exists, how do you know what you should or should not do to keep this God happy, to keep it from punishing you?
I'm sorry, I'm having problems formulating this answer. I'm not a native speaker.
That's fine.
Basically, I have a tendency to try to find the meaning to the bad things that happen in my life. I'm not really able to write them off as coincidence of integral part of every life. So in trying to find a reason, I tend to go back to this God.
Sure. Well, here's the thing.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Forrest.
Well, I was going to say, I think what, Matt's saying and what might help to understand is like, there's this old quote by Bertrand Russell that said that based on the sheer number of religions out there and all the different, iterations and interpretations and all the different denominations of every religion, even if we could all be sure that one of them was right, every single person should expect damnation just as a matter of probability, even if you believe in one of them. Based on the sheer number of them and all the ones that disagree with each other, you're probably going to hell anyway. So, you are surely, you've been brought up to be afraid of this God, of this religion that you have. And that's totally reasonable. Lots and lots of people have been. There's no shame in that. But ask yourself, how afraid are you of all of these other ideas out there? How worried are you about Sekhmet, the crocodilian-headed god of Egypt, and offending him? And also, how can you be sure that even in the religion that you were brought up in, even with the rules that you were taught, how can you be sure that those are the right ones? You can't. And so at the end of the day, you either need to be afraid of everything or decide if this God does exist, then, and if it is a good person, or a good whatever it is, then it should be able to tolerate being questioned a little bit. And if it can't, then fuck that guy anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When you said you didn't ever believe in heaven or hell, I didn't go down the normal route, which is, hey, if the goal is to seek an afterlife, which heaven should you seek? Should you seek the best heaven, or should you seek to avoid the worst hell? And what if in the process of avoiding the worst hell, you land in the second worst hell or the third worst hell? Or if you're seeking the second or third or fourth best heaven, it turns out that the fifth or first or eighth best heaven is the right one, but because you believed in a different one, you're punished. So I just skipped all that. And the question is, if you assume that the God you're afraid of is real, how do you find out what you are and aren't supposed to do in order to earn that God's favor, in order to avoid the thing that you're fearful of? And if you don't have a mechanism, if you don't have some way to say, oh, here's how I know what I should and shouldn't do, then whether or not you can stop yourself from believing it, and I don't think that you can, belief isn't a choice. I'm not convinced whether or not you actually believe so much as whether or not you're willing to act as if you believe out of fear. But at the end of the day, whether or not you are convinced that there is a God, if you're not convinced that you have a good course of action, if you're not convinced that you have some way of knowing what you should do, then I would argue that the best thing to do is to live your life as if you didn't believe in a God. That way, if there is a real God and he comes up to you and says, why are you worried about this other God? Why weren't you worshiping me? You can say, I would love to, if you had explained any of this to me or told me what I needed to do.
Oh, wow. I really like this argument. It's almost something a lawyer would say.
I've been accused of that once or twice.
So, in essence, it's about daring to do something without being sure of the consequences.
Yeah, a little bit. And that's the thing is like you mentioned at the beginning of the call, as I've said a lot of times, even if this God was real, I would still be against it, because this idea that if you don't believe in me and you don't worship me and you don't love me, I'm going to hurt you is awful. And if you add on the idea that I'm also not going to give you any good reason to believe in me and worship me and love me, but you still better do it, it's evil and it's kind of dumb. And so even if this was real, it is a very scary proposition. You were taught about a boogeyman in your closet that was used to scare children, and then they never told you it wasn't a real thing. And like I said, there's no shame in that. It happens to a lot of people. But just put it in your own words. Ask yourself, if a human being gave you this exact same situation, what would you do with it? Take your God out of the equation, because a lot of times people like to, they even if they don't realize they're doing it, they'll give special rules and special permissions to a God. Take that out. If I told you, hey, you better love me, and if you don't, I'll freaking murder you. And you've never met me before, and you have no idea who I am. Or if some random dude on the street said this to you, how would you handle it? Would you go on believing this and doing these things, or would you say, "Fuck you, I don't need to do any of this"?
I would take precautions. Probably have the police involved really quickly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, you can't call the cops on God. So, like, the best thing you can do is just say, "Screw it. I'm not interested."
Okay. Thanks to both of you. You have given me something to think about. But
Awesome.
I think I will be calling you again.
I hope so.
Thank you. Really.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Super nice lady. By the way, somebody pointed out in the chat that it was Sobek was the crocodile-headed god and Sekhmet was the lion-headed god. Thank you very much for correcting me. Y'all have too much time on your hands.
Well, I think some of it might be because a lot of people watched Moon Knight.
Oh, is that a big part of it?
If you haven't seen Moon Knight, it's one of the best of the Marvel Disney Plus series. But yes, there's references to those in there. But on that note, we've got Mike in Washington. Pronouns are he, him. Welcome, Mike. How can we help?
Hey, great to talk to you both. So I would say I'm probably in the midst of a deconstruction, still piecing that out. But I read an article that my dad had around about God's promises and climate change lies. And I'm just curious as to know what ways we can kind of combat the thought that climate change isn't happening, because in Genesis, God says, the seasons and the weather will always be the same. And
so we can do that. We can do that. We can do that in the same way that we can say that Genesis got the order of events in creation wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you like ask this parent of yours? Do you believe that plants existed before the sun did? And if so, how? that's the whole thing. Is like if they're gonna fall back on, well, the Bible said this, therefore blah blah blah. I don't think that it makes any sense to single out climate change as opposed to anything else. I can sit here and go over the different evidences for climate change for you if you like. I'd be happy to go through a few of them. But it doesn't change shit if you're starting from the premise of the Earth is 6,000 years old and this book says so, therefore it's real.
Yeah. I would also, as one last little thing on this, there's a resource I would recommend, and that is go to talkorigins.org. And there's the Index to Creationist Claims. And now everything that they say, pretty much, from a creationist perspective, is addressed. Everything in all kinds of different categories. They discuss it from philosophy and theology, from biology, abiogenesis, genetics, molecular biology, physiology, and anatomy. It's here just for funsies. I'll pick out a couple of things. Evolution is racist. That's CA005. You click on that, and it will show you what the actual science is behind it. Creationism and evolution are the only two models. It'll answer that. I'm sure there's one in here on the order of events in Genesis. Genesis 1 got the order of events right. And that day-age creationism goes through and shows that the creation account in Genesis lists 10 events in the order from a beginning, a primitive earth and darkness, light, an expansive atmosphere, large areas of dry land, land plants, sun, moon, and stars, sea monsters and flying creatures, wild and tame beasts, and then man. The odds of getting that order correct by chance are 1 in 3,628,800. But the real order is a beginning, then light, then sun and stars, then earth, moon, and atmosphere, then dry land, sea creatures, some land plants, land creatures, flying creatures, then mammals, and then the first birds, the fruiting plants, etc. And it gives references in there. It's like a little miniature Wikipedia for responding to creationist claims. I keep it up whenever I'm on the show because I can't possibly keep all of this memorized. If you can't find it, just Google Index to Creationist Claims, and you will find it at Talk Origins.
All right.
if you're into
I think I was
books,
kind of
there's also this one. This is from Mark Isaac. I think this is from a university. It's from the University of California, and it's called the Counter Creationism Handbook. And it's the same thing, but it's not as expansive as a website would be. But it's a lot of fun because like this is another one. It's just this was published in 2007, and like literally you can go through this and pull like any half the time when I'm on this show or any of these shows, something somebody says is in great detail in here with a bunch of scientific citations on like, here's why this is bullshit. It's amazing how unimaginative they are.
Yeah, as I was about to say, I think what really shocked me is because I knew you've been reading like bogus science, and the same article references terrible science, but it tried to make the point that climate change activism and belief in it is literally evil because humans are supposed to flourish and have dominion over the earth. And I'd never considered that might be going on in, my dad's head, whereas I'm learning these ideas and making these changes and my fundamental belief. I didn't even know how to approach it, but the resources sound good.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that it's yet another case of science versus religion. It's just like with creationism, when people say that evolution isn't true. Well, fuck, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Here's all this evidence. And with climate change, like we can look at ice cores, we can look at forams, we can look at dendrochronology, we can look at a million different things and show that this is very real and very scary. It is the greatest existential threat to human life currently facing us. We need to take care of it while we still have the choice to do so. But first we have to agree on whether or not evidence is important, and then what evidence is, and then which evidence actually matters, and then what the evidence says. And that is a long uphill battle.
And in the case of, what your dad's saying is, oh, well, it was put here for man to use, and so it's not going to... This is stuff that came from, I remember hearing Rush Limbaugh talking about it on the air, in the 90s. That's an assertion about what we're here for that he can't demonstrate. My favorite, one of my favorite entries on the entire index to creationist claims is Kent Hovind made a claim about the universe is not billions of years old, and in it he said, the Sahara Desert is expanding at such a rate that it can only be a few thousand years old, indicating a young Earth. And the response here is, yes, the Sahara Desert is only a few thousand years old. What does that have to do with the age of the Earth? I mean, you might as well be talking about, Pangea and continental drift and all this other stuff. Yet deserts come and go. The climate of various ages changes. Maybe the Saharan Desert's fairly young, but that doesn't tell you anything about how the age of the Earth is any more than, the Great Pyramid at Giza is only, a few thousand years old.
If the Earth was really billions of years old, there would be pyramids everywhere, man.
Yeah, I get it. I went to a man-made thing, which is a bad analogy, but anyway.
It is like, that's the thing is like, I've heard similar arguments, and like these people just need to learn what a fucking biome is and like how they're classified, because like it's not like the desert's just gonna pop up in the Amazon like a legion. Like it's crazy. It's nuts. But yeah, no, it's difficult to have these conversations when you first have to understand whether or not the conversation matters and what evidence there is and what evidence there is and all this stuff. So if your parent is just stuck on this idea that the Bible is right and that God gave us dominion over earth, the first thing I would ask is, if someone that really is that you should look up to, if this great important thing gave you a present, why would you treat that present like shit? If he gave us dominion over the earth and you really believe that, we should take care of this gift that he gave us and make sure that we are treating it effectively so that we can continue to live here. Because the science that we are hurting the planet and destroying the climate is unavoidable. So because God gave us this earth, we should make sure that we're taking good care of it, taking good care of this gift that God gave us, and making it beautiful for all the future generations to see this beautiful planet and then get to go to heaven. I would absolutely play into that shit. And then we can get to deconstruction later. But first, right now, holy crap, we need like energy reform and effective climate action. That would be great, and it's going to take a lot less time to fix that than hopefully the religion, probably.
Does that help, Mike, or you got another question?
I like that. No, that helps, and I like that idea a lot. Forrest just founded on, and I think I'll take a look at the resources. So I thank you guys for your time.
Thanks so much.
Forrest, go to climate.nasa.gov as well if you want some really easy educational resources. Climate.nasa.gov.
Yep. Well, yeah. Matter of fact, if one of the mods could put climate.nasa.gov in the chat, that'll be.
I'm 99% sure that's the way. Let me just double check. Climate.nasa.gov. Let me make sure that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. And it immediately has readouts here of like carbon dioxide is at 420 parts per million. Arctic sea ice minimum extent is down 12.6% per decade since 1979. Sea level is up 4 inches since 1993. Like the data are right there for you to play with and read. I'll put it right here in the chat for you. Oh my God, I just copied so much shit about stable isotopes because I copied the wrong thing. Oh, Lord, no. There we go.
All right, final call of the night that we're going to get onto is super chats. We have John, pronouns he, him, and has a question for us about Islam. So welcome, John.
Hey, him on the air?
Yep. You are.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know, so I am a deist of a non-Islamic background. I consider myself to have more liberal interpretations, in the sense I don't believe in some gay people and such. This is less so a theological question about the validity of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, etc., but more about how politically feasible it would be to theologically reform the Islamic world.
What did you just say?
I have no idea, but I have no reason to think it's likely. Go ahead, Forrest.
I didn't hear what you said. You were more left leaning or more liberal.
He wants to know is Islam reformable?
I'm a liberal, but I'm not.
Oh no! I heard that. I heard that. It's just when you were explaining it, you said you're more liberal in certain things, and then you said something very quickly after that. And I'm saying I'm a
theist who happens to have liberal views on theism.
Okay.
So I don't believe in fundamentalism.
I could have sworn you said something fucking nuts, and I'm just going to move on. I apologize for wasting your time. You go on now.
Okay. Yeah, so I was asking, do you think it'll ever be possible to politically or theologically reform the Islamic world through interpretation?
Not any more than any other religion. And in fact, probably less likely because Islam has that caveat of saying that it is the last final word of God and it cannot be changed. So, probably less likely. But I would say out of all of it.
So I come from many. Hey, am I on the air?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, so I come from a background, but I have many different members of my family history who come from Christian, Jewish, etc. backgrounds, and I study theology a lot because I just think it's a very important thing to study how you interpret it. And I think the main difference between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity is each of them have a different way of interpreting. So Christianity gets away with a lot of the stuff in the Old Testament about slavery, stoning gay people, etc., the fact that Christianity only listens to Jesus and can ignore the Hebrew Bible, and Judaism gets away with it because modern Talmudic Judaism believes in the oral Torah but doesn't listen to the Hebrew Bible. So Talmud is a much higher authority than the Hebrew Bible, which is also why Judaism. Whereas Islam says the Quran is the final word of God and so has to deal with all the bad behaviors of Muhammad. So I think trying to parse out the individual theologies of each of these religions and how they'll try and manifest is important. I think the only real way you're going to try and the issue with Islam specifically is that you have to rely on the imam or an individual Muslim. So it's going to have to take a lot of work to try and pressure individual Muslims to say maybe the way you interpret Quran would have to be more in the context of time, et cetera, for them to become more liberal or pluralistic in their societies. It's a lot harder than other religions, I think. But do you think that'll ever happen, or do you think that we already answered
the question? Neither of us think it's likely to happen.
Yeah, but why?
Stuff about Islam.
John.
Stuff about Islam has already changed quite a bit. Hold on. Stuff about Islam has already changed in the past. For example, there used to be plenty of drawings and artwork about Muhammad, and now it's very much taboo. And so like things like that change all the time. Islam used to be, or I should say, like Islamic cities used to be capitals of scientific development and learning. There's a reason why most of the stars in the night sky have Arabic names. There's a reason why algorithm is an Arabic word. There's a reason why algebra is an Arabic word. So Islam has already changed quite a bit. It will probably change in the future. As far as whether it's going to become more liberal or more, progressive or whatever, that has more to do with how desperately it will try to hold on to social relevance. But at the end of the day, it's still a religion, it's still a dogma, and it's unlikely it's going to change too strongly. Now, I have to ask you, I can't get away from the fact, I'm 99% sure I heard you say this. Do you believe that gay people exist? I swear to God, you said I don't believe in gay people.
Yes, I said I don't believe. No, I said I'm liberal because I don't believe in stoning gay people. If homosexuality is immoral.
Doesn't believe in stoning.
Is immoral. That's the whole. Half the chat agreed with me. We all heard you say I don't believe in gay people, and I had to know before we moved on any further with this call. I thought you said gay people weren't real, or that you didn't believe in them, or you didn't listen to them. I was gonna lose it. Okay, you don't believe in stoning them. I agree. Great. Okay, cool.
Yes. Way to take the high road.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I think the only thing about that is, in the same way Christian societies may have used to been a certain way, and we've moved on from that after the Enlightenment. I don't see why.
Yes, there are differences. So, John, you already went through and highlighted the differences, and Forrest highlighted the differences. And I said that I don't know, but I don't think that it's likely. I think there are things about Islam that make it more rigid than Christianity. But yes, it can potentially change depending on who's popular and who takes charge. But I can't predict the fucking future, so I told you what I thought was going to happen. Do we have some way, apart from waiting, to find out which of us is correct?
I guess I would think it would just have to be a long course of dialogue with the Islamic world. But you're right, you can only judge in retrospect what will happen.
Yep. And on that front, I got to let it go and move on. We got super chats. Thanks for calling, John. Pleasure.
Take care, John.
All right.
I'm glad to hear that you think gay people exist. I was seriously worried for a second. I'm not.
I heard it.
So many people in chat. It's so weird.
I heard it. I knew what he said. I was trying to correct it so that we could just move on.
No,
because the last thing we needed was to get John thinking we were beating him up for denying the existence of gay people. But he had already gone on. He'd already gone on to address it in another comment. You guys were so obsessed about not hearing what he said the first time that you didn't hear the second comment that he said about gay people. But here we go.
I couldn't get past it. I was sitting here like, surely I'm crazy. Surely I misheard it.